Alright, continuing on to the next video on our nostalgic deep dives. We're diving into some more nostalgic animations from just my childhood in general, from when I was younger. Some of them were when I was coming up, some of them I watched just from reruns and everything. But the next one we're going to be diving into here is Disney's Gargoyles. Now, Gargoyles was definitely a much darker themed animation, and I see why I didn't survive into the newer age or whatnot, but this is like the age of like the Buffys and the Charmed shows, like where like the dark and edgy stuff, like what was that, Underworld and all that, was like really the go-to. What is that, like what was the Matrix? I know it's like cyberpunk with that, but yeah, I guess like the with like the leather and whatnot, but this was it's more gothic is the whole thing, I think. But so we're gonna take a quick deep dive into it. But again, Gargoyles on the another thing, just to make sure that is mentioned, some of the best voice acting, some of the craziest storylines and writing, for it to be literally a show about gargoyles and whatnot. Like, they've got some heavy hitters in the show, so it is something, again, animation cannot be looked down on when it comes to just storytelling and world building. It's just amazing. So this next one is What Happened to Disney's Dark Horse, a Gargoyles retrospective,
to be in a
by Foxade.
20 years ago, arcades and cable TV ruled. It was a time of darkness. It was a world of fear. It was the age of gargoyles. For those of you too young to remember, of gargoyles,
For why? On the Disney Channel?
It was the age of gargoyles. For those of you too young to remember, before the age of YouTube and social media, between the years of 1990 and 1997, there existed a 2-hour television block called the Disney Afternoon. And during this block full of tales of ducks and gummy bear adventures, there was an odd show called Gargoyles, which told the story of a group of gargoyles from 10th century Scotland being transported to 20th century New York City, and their lives adapting to their new situation. When smug millennials of my age say cartoons were better in the 90s, Gargoyles is one of the series that tends to come out of our mouths when listing examples. And for quite good reason. Gargoyles came right at the time when animation focused towards kids was starting to be taken more seriously as an art form, with darker series like Batman the Animated Series and Gargoyles at the forefront. Characters grew and changed with each episode, the status quo was regularly shifting. This was a cartoon that dealt with complex issues that other shows of the time didn't, such as personal morality, gun safety, prejudice, revenge, and the importance of reading. But just as quickly as it came, Gargoyles seemed to vanish just as well from the public consciousness.
Never, not from the people that love that shit. Could never forget this masterpiece. Jeez. But as far as like, it was easily missable, I feel like, because you would have probably saw the intros like, what is happening on my cartoon channel right now?
Mostly maintaining a cult status in corners of the internet, as well as people that go, oh hey, Gargoyles, I love that show as a kid, when they hear it mentioned in conversation or see a related video recommended to them. So what happened? For a series that many claim to be a beloved part of their childhood, why did it go away as quickly as it did? Is this a case of nostalgia goggles blinding fans from the problems of an age-old series? Or was there something more to it all that wasn't seen? Well, throw off your backpack, grab a couple of fruit roll-ups, and sit back as I tell you a tale of success, failures, company mismanagement, and fan love. A tale of Gargoyles.
We are defenders of the night. We are gargoyles.
Like, why?
To talk about Gargoyles proper though, we first have to talk about
such a hard ass intro and introduction with a hard ass voice actor on the Disney Channel again.
Disney.
Like you said, at this time there was stuff like Rescue Rangers, DuckTales, Chippendale. That's what it said, Chippendale Rescue Rangers. And then in betwixt all this, you get Gargoyles. It's just some of the most jarring stuff, but it was so
specifically the Disney
good.
Afternoon. Now, while today we all view it as the mega corporation that will eventually own us all, in the 80s, Disney had been in a major rut for a couple decades and was struggling to stay afloat. Something the then new CEO and future company villain Michael Eisner had hopes to turn around, as he had multiple strategies to revitalize Disney to its former glory. From building and expanding on its theme parks, multiple business acquisitions, and the resurgence of major critically and commercially successful animated films, Eisner was pursuing every possible avenue to make Disney a profitable company again. But of these plans to slowly take over the world, one of his more subtle approaches was to use TV as a way to market to a new generation of young fans with new characters mixed along with classics. A then radical move because Disney had avoided creating animation for television for over 3 decades. And thus in 1990, the Disney Afternoon was made, a block of cartoons created for Disney to be packaged and syndicated together for affiliate stations nationwide that would air between 3 and 5 p.m. to target the after-school crowd, premiering series like Chippendale's Rescue Rangers, Tailspin, Darkwing Duck, and Goof Troop, all shows that attracted a lot of viewers. Though while the block was largely successful in its first couple of years, there started to be growing concerns by Disney TV animation founder Gary Crissell and one of the studio producers, Greg Weisman, that the Disney Afternoon had not enough diversity in its type of shows, especially from a visual standpoint, being exclusively dominated by bright, colorful, anthropomorphic animal cartoons. And that would eventually lead to fatigue in audiences that might want something a bit different.
Yeah, it was full of saturation and just like, yeah, all like just not Looney Tunes, but yeah, they were just different misadventures of like all of the Disney properties that you'd seen thus far. So it wasn't like much out of the scope of like, you know, what you already got from Disney, I guess, in that sense, which I guess it can be stale to a degree.
So Weisman started working on a pitch for a new cartoon, something distinct from the rest of the shows Disney was producing at the time, something with a rich backstory, strong character writing, and because it was the 90s, a bit of edge. This resulted in a series about gargoyles, magic beings that slept in stone during the day and came to life at night, set in modern-day 1990s Manhattan to make it really stand out. Originally though, while what would eventually become Gargoyles was fundamentally there, with detailed lore and a darker tone, the show at first had more of a comedic slant earlier in its development, such as the main villain Xavier having an assistant that was transformed into an anthropomorphic aardvark by a magic spell in the first episode. So despite Weisman's ambitions, when he first pitched the show to Eisner chose to pass on it. Gargoyles was a riskier venture for the company considering how much of a huge jump it was from its other programming. It wasn't based on a toy line or feature film, so there wasn't already an established audience to work off of, and it was skewing towards an older audience than its predecessors on the block.
Yeah, and I'm sure like the concept on paper coming to like producers of a kids network is saying not only are we trying to do this thing about, you know, monsters that come to life at night, but we also want to make it like story driven and plot developed where it like handles heavy issues like they said, like gun violence, revenge, prejudice. Like they're like Disney sitting there like, yo, hold on, what, hold on.
Things that could have been an issue for the show if not done right, but the people at Disney TV Animation thought Weisman was onto something. There was just a missing element to bring it together. Funny enough, it was actually another Disney property that had the answer. Because with the film Beauty and the Beast being the biggest film out for Disney at the time, the idea of having a beauty along with a beast as the leads was already floating around, which Tad Stone, the creator of Darkwing Duck, suggested Weisman use for Gargoyles, which proved to be the final piece of the puzzle, as the framing of the whole show around this new, larger gargoyle Goliath and their romance with a human detective named Elisa was when everything that would be seen in the final product started to line up. And with it, a new generation of monster-loving degenerates was born. So after 2 years of development, another failed pitch, and further retooling, Eisner finally bought Weiss's pitch and greenlit the show. But still being apprehensive of the project, only gave Weissman and his team a 13-episode first season compared to the usual 50 episodes they would typically order, meaning Gargoyles still had to prove itself. So what did Weissman do with this opportunity? Well,
yeah, he went the fuck off, is what he did.
he and his production team made one of the best cartoons Disney has ever produced.
Like, he said, oh, okay, bet. You said what? We need, all right, bet. You gonna give me only 15 episodes? All right, say less. I'm about to show you. Damn, that's crazy. Now it's understandable why you had to go this hard.
Right from the start, Gargoyles was different from other cartoons at the time, debuting with a 5-part story arc that ran every day for an entire week, which would later be compiled into a direct-to-video movie, along with a VCR board game, which is possibly the most 90s sentence I've ever said without mentioning Tamagotchis.
I'm afraid I can't allow you to stop Xanatos. The success of his plan directly affects mine, so the player who just spun must go back 6 spaces.
Oh, it's one
These
of
first
those.
5 episodes were used for extensive character and world building, because compared to DuckTales and Goof Troop, which were episodic comedy adventures that established themselves in a single episode, Gargoyles was built on extensive lore, creating multiple interconnected storylines with ongoing character arcs to the show, playing out more like a serial than an after-school cartoon, especially as the series continued. The pacing was slow and methodical, taking its time to establish a tone and setting. Much of the main cast weren't even named for the first few episodes because Gargoyles are established as not keeping to human naming conventions. Structurally speaking, Gargoyles was much closer to the way comics played out over any cartoon. And if that wasn't already clear, just compare how Gargoyles is structured to Weissman's other series, Young Justice. Both use narratively standalone episodes that are loosely tied together to make a much larger framework of a story.
Damn, okay, that makes sense. The creator of Gargoyles also made Young Justice. 2 fire series.
You know, that structure everyone gives a lot of credit to
Amazing
Adventure Time
plot
for?
And
Yeah.
writing.
Snarky comments aside, the other thing that made Gargoyles really stand out is that it was heavy. There was tragedy, pathos, and a heavy emphasis in Shakespeare and Celtic myth. It was a series that tackled adult subject matter in a way younger audiences could easily digest, mostly by respecting their intelligence. In one of the series' more controversial yet most remembered episodes, Brooklyn ended up hurting Elisa after playing around with her gun. And it doesn't shy away from the seriousness of the topic either, with Elisa spending the majority of the episode in critical condition. But above all else, the central theme of the first season was the Gargoyles looking for their place in the world and people that would accept them for who they were, something a lot of kids and teenagers could probably relate to. These were characters with nuanced personalities and morals, and this applied to the villains just as well, as their motives weren't simply evil for evil's sake. Xanatos was a clever entrepreneur that was always working out strategies so that he would always come out winning in the end, even when he appears to lose, but gradually grows into a more sympathetic person as he finds things to care about. Demona, after dealing with over a century's worth of prejudice, hates humans for what they did to her kind and wants to show Goliath the truth of the world. And Coldstone was a revived mechanical gargoyle going through their own identity crisis. Though, like any Shakespearean play, it wasn't just the writing, it was how it was spoken, because the voice cast that was hired for Gargoyles was top-notch. Keith David was the perfect casting for Goliath, giving the character this powerful, booming voice that screams leader.
I've been denied everything, even my revenge!
Okay, between making Goliath look like Fabio crossed with a bat and giving him a voice like this, I'm certain Disney and Weissman knew exactly what they were doing to their audience. But it wasn't just Keith David carrying the voice acting. There was Sally Richardson as Elisa, Marina Sirtis as Demona, John Rhys Davies as the antagonist Macbeth, and professional interrogator Jonathan Frakes as Xanatos.
How much money would it take to make you spend a night in a cemetery?
You know the answer to that, Owen. Pay a man enough, and he'll walk barefoot into hell.
Then there was the animation, which even by today's standards, 20 years later, is beautiful, both in its use of color and its composition, especially in the first 5 pilot episodes, where money seemed to have been thrown at the project. There are some shots that I've used a couple times in this video simply because they're so visually striking, like Goliath screaming into the night sky with the moon frame behind him. What really sells the look is the use of painted backgrounds, as they work extremely well for the style the show is going for, utilizing a lot of dark blue and gray tones to give it a broodier feeling, and makes the sunrises really pop, which was important since they had a narrative weight, being that was when the gargoyles are forced to sleep, adding a sort of ticking clock to everything. So it needed to be visually clear by the lighting and shading how close they were, and when that shift would happen. Also, as an aside, whoever on the art team came up with the idea of having the gargoyles' wings wrap around their bodies and clasping at the front to become a cloak was a goddamn genius, as it gave their designs, specifically Goliath's, a calmer, human-like shadow when the story's tone required it, distinguishing them from their animalistic design and leaning into a more superhero aesthetic, something that was likely influenced by Batman. And it wasn't just the visuals that took inspiration from Batman either, because Gargoyles clearly used the show as an example or template for its direction, with the majority of season 1 being written by husband and wife team Michael and Brienne Chandler Reeves, who came from writing on Batman the Animated Series. On the subject, Weisman himself said, "We weren't trying to emulate Batman, but certainly that darker, dramatic tone that Batman had let us know that there was an audience for this style of action drama at a high quality level." Sadly, Bruce Timm, lead creator on Batman the Animated Series, didn't share the same level of artistic respect to Gargoyles at the time, saying the whole premise of the show was kinda namby-pamby anyway, with all that Celtic fantasy crap.
Wow.
Like, come on, Tim. I know you made one of the best cartoons of the 20th century, but really? Do you gotta be like that? Regardless of certain perceptions, though, Gargoyles definitely stood on its own as it went on, from the way it handled its characters to how it structured its stories. And the first season of the series was a massive hit because of it. However, while this was a huge victory for Weisman and his team, the show's early success may have also built it up to fail.
What?
Stay tuned. The Disney Afternoon will return.
Live up to the hype.
So after seeing the initial success of its first season, Eisner went from being skeptical of Gargoyles to one of its most avid supporters, going so far as deciding the series would be the pillar of a new action-focused universe within Disney that could compete with Marvel and DC, and went ahead with greenlighting a 52-episode second season. But while it was great that the series finally had the complete support of the CEO, this was also a problem, because the staff on Gargoyles was given a 10-month production cycle just like they were with the first season. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this type of 52-episode production was common for Disney's other cartoons, but as established, Gargoyles was a fundamentally different product. So despite expanding on the writing and animation staff to help, asking for 4 times the amount of episodes and expecting the same level of quality as the first season was pushing it, which inevitably led to production issues, such as having to recycle a lot of music and sound effects from the previous season, with very few new scores added in, and often using the same impact sound for every type of material. Weisman has even stated that the recaps at the start of episodes in this season were less about reminding the audience of characters and plot details, but was a way to cut out 30 seconds or so of bad animation that they would get from the Japanese or Korean studios that they had contracted out to. Outside of the production issues though, now having the backing of Eisner, season 2 was where the writers and other creative staff could really spread their wings, so to speak, and go even further in depth with the stories they wanted to tell now that the basic premise was established after the first season, becoming more and more like a magic Shakespearean soap opera as it progressed. Xanatos and leader of the pack Fox are revealed to be in a relationship, eventually getting married, having a kid, and being visited by Fox's mother Titania, queen of the fairies. Elisa's brother gets transformed into a mutant furry, and then forms his own clan after turning on Xanatos. Coldstone develop multiple personalities, which are in a love triangle with each other. The main cast gained a roster of evil genetic clones, all named after cities in Los Angeles, which is fitting, and that's all without getting into the time travel and mythological beings. But while it might sound like I'm being cheeky about these premises, these are all great storylines that expanded on the world and characters.
Yeah,
take the backstory between Demona and Macbeth, something that was hinted at in the previous season, but wasn't detailed until the 4-part story arc, City of Stone. Using Shakespeare's Macbeth as a vague jumping off point, the 4 episodes shows the years Demona struggled to survive after Goliath and the rest were cursed, and the Alliance turned a millennia-long 1v1 deathmatch that she developed with the real Macbeth. By the end of it all, it starts to make sense why Demona has such a strong resentment and hatred towards humans, and how scorned she felt having Goliath choose them over her. She spent 1,000 years fighting for her life, and when she's finally reunited with her love, he chooses to side with her enemies. The story doesn't just blame the society she lived in though, because it makes a point of calling into question Demona's part in everything that happened, as Demona's thirst for vengeance only perpetuated further harm, creating a never-ending cycle while she maintained her own victim complex. I'm repeating myself here, but that's some sophisticated morality for a show airing on Disney at 4 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. But easily the biggest change up to the story in season 2 was halfway through, when Goliath, Elisa, and Bronx were taken to the island of Avalon from Arthurian legend, where they had to fight a time-traveling wizard and the 3 weird sisters along with King Arthur. Sure, it sounds ridiculous when it's said out loud. This was then followed by a 20-episode arc where the group, along with Goliath's long-lost daughter, traveled across the world as Avalon magically transported them to places where they could
His long-lost daughter with who?
help, thus leading to a tour of multiple nations and their unique gargoyles and mythologies. Now, this is just my assumption here, but this world tour arc was more than likely done as a way to pad out the 52-episode production request, because having to create multiple interconnected storylines across that many episodes in 10 months would be a major challenge. So this arc was used as a way to pad it out, since most of these episodes are entirely self-removed from the rest, feeling more like filler by comparison, and were pretty hit or miss as they went on. In one episode, a man tries to capture the Egyptian death god Anubis in order to force him to bring back his dead son, only having to accept he has to let his son rest in peace in the end, as death isn't something you can bargain with. This was Gargoyles at its best, addressing tougher concepts like grief, acceptance, and the necessity and inevitability of death. Also, having Tony Jay voice Anubis was just a fantastic pick.
I grant but one boon, mortal, and it will be given to you as it is given to everyone when your time has come.
But then there were episodes that felt like they were really
That's some crazy voice acting right there. Yeah, damn, this show has some amazing voice actors coming through.
Stretching for a premise, like the group visiting Easter Island and learning that the famous head statues were modeled after an alien who resided there protecting Earth from an extraterrestrial invasion from eons ago. Now, I'm apprehensive of saying this arc was explicitly terrible, it's just that the episode quality was constantly fluctuating over this entire storyline, especially for how long it lasted, which might have been to the show's detriment in the long run. While Gargoyles still maintained a strong audience, Disney in general began to view the show's second season as a disappointment, hoping to see it outperform shows like Power Rangers airing at the same time, which was asking a lot considering Power Rangers was easily the most viewed kids programming of that year.
That, and it had a whole toy line, like back, like you had the Power Rangers toys, like come on, that's a lot. That's asking for a lot.
What didn't help though was that Gargoyles was also aired.
It also had, like, you know, that comes from the Japanese show, like, what is it, Kamen Rider. So like it already has an established fan base with other toys that already exist before that as well. So that's asking for a lot.
During the infamous O.J. Simpson trials, causing what should have been 4 weeks of the world tour to become 6 months due to being regularly bumped for trial coverage. making the entire thing feel like it lasted way too long, which started to hurt viewership with those that wanted to return to adventures in New York City with the entire clan. Programming issues notwithstanding, Gargoyles not quite reaching those high expectations could have been glanced over since it was still quite well received overall and did decent ratings, but Disney was also dealing with massive shakeups within its higher-ups, and all of Gargoyles' firm supporters in the company, like Jeffrey Katzenberg and Gary Crystal, had left for DreamWorks, and Eisner was no longer in control of the animation division due to criticisms that he micromanaged too much, meaning no one was around to fight for the show outside of Weissman, and Gargoyles was in danger of being scrapped entirely. But since the show still had some worth to it, the Disney execs in charge gave Gargoyles one more shot. Though in hindsight, they just as well were setting it up to fail. And this brings us to the point that a lot of longtime Gargoyles fans watching likely have been anticipating. Like one gets excited for a root canal, because now we get to the infamous third season, titled The Goliath Chronicles, which is just okay. It's not god-awful necessarily, it's just simply alright. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine.
Doesn't sound like fine.
But that's also the problem. After following up the previous 2 seasons, even with their shortcomings, just alright is a steep step down. But let's back up a bit. So after the previous season failed to meet Disney's expectations and a limitation on resources and time, it was decided by Disney management to allocate Gargoyles from primarily Disney's in-house TV animation studio to the Canadian studio Nelvan in favor of series they felt would perform better, which would be the first of many death nails in the show's coffin. To start, in general the animation simply became a lot more stiff, losing the bounce and vibrancy that the series originally had. The one episode where that type of animation could be seen again was in the episode Seeing Isn't Believing, which was actually outsourced to Disney Animation Australia. But it had its own inconsistencies, with Elisa being given facial features closer to Jasmine from Aladdin and a sexy swagger to her walk, which I'm not entirely against per se, but this wasn't consistent with her design or character. Even by the animator's own account, they were given zero time to familiarize themselves with the characters since it was treated as a filler project, so they basically did what they wanted, which shows how very little concern Disney had for the show at that point. And while it would be impossible to expect the show to have the animation quality it had at the very start, after Disney reallocated the series due to not wanting to spend more money on it, there are fundamental animation fumbles that are harder to excuse. Like this gun that Goliath's clone Thalog is holding in an episode suddenly appearing to be the same perspective size when held by Dr. Severus' mutant clone, who is 3 times larger. I mean, what are we to believe this is some sort of magic gun? Boy, I really hope somebody got fired for that blunder. To make matters worse, on top of the animation studio change, Gargoyles was also moved from the syndicated Disney Afternoon over to the newly bought ABC network in order to bolster its Saturday morning programming, which meant it was exclusively airing on that network. So viewers used to watching it on specific affiliates would have missed it if they weren't aware of the change. Gargoyles being exclusive to ABC's network also meant that the writing team had to follow.
I do remember it disappearing for a while and then like finding it randomly like on ABC, like just reruns.
Stricter standard and practice rules than it was when it was syndicated, which started to create issues. So while the show was fortunate enough to keep its voice actors, most of its creative staff, from the writers to producers, did not stay, either due to creative restrictions or being outright replaced. Weissman was even changed from a series producer to story editor only, which eventually just became a creative consultant role which he chose not to be credited for, as he felt he only advised against decisions rather than actually adding anything, leading us to the biggest failing of this season, the writing itself.
He's like, look, don't put me as a critic because I was only telling y'all not to do shit. So if you don't need to put my name on that, that's hilarious. He's like, look, nah, don't put my name nowhere near that bullshit.
Where the earlier seasons subtly and maturely addressed that prejudice and mistrust based on superficial ideas simply leads to further hatred and violence, only perpetuating a cycle that never stops, season 3 jumps right to, and I don't know any other way to phrase this, Gargoyles KKK. And it's not as if there wasn't a racial subtext this series before, because there very much was, but this season's writing takes that subtext and pushes it to clear, bright neon text.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
And what makes this frustrating is that there were interesting concepts to the stories in this season. Now that gargoyles were common knowledge to the people after the finale of the last season, there were intriguing avenues to go, like with Goliath's trial. Originally, it was supposed to be to deliberate on the gargoyle's sentience, questioning if the gargoyles counted as humans or animals and where they fell in regards to the law. That's a point that would have been great to see addressed. But then it became Gargoyle Court, where Goliath has to prove he didn't commit a robbery. And this goes into a larger issue for this season, where the episodes became much more isolated, with little connection to the rest of the series or each other, which made everything feel like they had substantially less stakes compared to the previous seasons, despite there being set up for a strong storyline where the gargoyles have to find their place in a city that actively hates them. Frankly, between the heavy-handed bigotry subtext and allowing many real stakes, the Goliath Chronicles became a much less enjoyable X-Men cartoon than Gargoyles, which is probably due to the fact that a large majority of the writing staff on this new season came from X-Men the animated series. Now, this isn't saying the X-Men series is bad, I have plenty of nostalgia for it, but it's clear that the writing team were working from what they knew, as they had very little time to actually familiarize themselves with the first 2 seasons of Gargoyles and all its lore, which is why a lot of the established ideas and characters were entirely forgotten or neglected, especially anything coming from season 2. So despite having a good opening setup for interesting storylines, the Goliath Chronicles failed to meet the high expectations of the series, and due to both the show being moved from weekday afternoons to Saturday mornings on a single channel, and the overall drop in quality, the ratings for the Goliath Chronicles tanked, resulting in Disney choosing not to renew it. Season 3, by most accounts, just didn't need to exist, from the creators deeming it non-canon to Disney only releasing the first 2 seasons on DVD years later. So that's the end of it? A sad, limp ending to a show so iconic and innovative? Well, not entirely. While the series ended in 1997, it lasted a lot longer than that, simply because the fans and the creators wouldn't let it die. Outside of North America, Gargoyles still regularly airs, even if just reruns, on Disney channels in countries like Italy, Serbia, and the United Kingdom. Then there's Weissman himself, who years after leaving the company, pushed Disney to allow him and a team to produce a couple 12-issue comic runs, one of which continued off where he personally left the series, thus retroactively making his own new canon for fans that didn't like how the show ended. And of course, it wouldn't be a Disney property without merchandising deals long after they stopped actually caring about it.
Yep.
But one of the most astounding pushes to keep the series alive was the Gathering of the Gargoyles, an annual Gargoyles convention, which started in June 1997, shortly after the final season ended. This was a convention created, funded, and ran by the Gargoyles fandom, for those who just wanted to be around other fans of a similar interest, showing off art, cosplay, and radio plays based on the series, and inviting those involved in the show for panels and signings. At first it started as a simple small-time con, only having Greg Weissman and Keith David as guests, but over the years it became a sizable convention with upwards of 50 guests and multiple events, before it ended in 2009 due to funding issues and creative conflicts with those involved. Regardless of how it ended though, conventions aren't something easily put together, nor are they ever really profitable. So these gatherings were clearly a labor of love by the people who organized them, and just shows how much love they had for 3 seasons of a cartoon. You don't spend over 10 years organizing an event across multiple cities without a deep passion for it.
Well, 1,000%. Like, I mean, that's how most of these cosplay conventions even get started. It's like either off a college campus or whatnot, and starts the thing for the first few years, and then as more people find out about it, you get more sponsors, it gets bigger, and then eventually it's huge, and then it becomes like city crossing or whatnot. Like, I mean, then it's city spanning, and then it's like multiple cities. So
this animated show about gargoyles adventuring around New York City, despite existing in relative obscurity outside of millennials like myself after it stopped airing, had a major impact on a lot of people, and fostered a sizable fan community that thrived long after it went off the air, which speaks to just how strongly media can affect and shape us. Whether it's Gargoyles, Reboot, Kirby, 16, Pokemon, or My Little Pony, everyone has that one series that they hold deeply for whatever reason. And maybe, just maybe, with the reboots of older cartoons of Disney's like DuckTales seeing huge success, and a growing appreciation for longer form narratives in Western animation, we might just see the Gargoyles revisited in an era where it would get a better shot than it did. But until then, they'll just have to keep sleeping.
I doubt it, because I feel like unless it's picked up on like a Netflix or something like that, we'd get like just like a dumbed down version of it. I feel like if it was on any like actual cable television like Disney or Cartoon Network and stuff. But okay. That was Foxcade with What Happened to Disney's Dark Horse, or Gargoyles retrospective. Yeah, like I said, Gargoyles was on another level in general when it came to like just narration, the actual just style of it. It was just nothing like it on Disney. And I don't think even to this day there's never been like it on Disney as far as like how dark it gets and like, you know, the top. Well, I mean, I feel like they still handle like certain topics like that, but not in such a direct approach, at least, and not in such a stylish approach as well. Like, oh my god, said Keith David, an amazing amazing job on Gargoyles. Like that intro, hold on,
1,000 years ago, superstition and the sword ruled. It was a time of darkness. It was a world of fear. It was the age of gargoyles. Stone by day, warriors by night. We were betrayed by the humans we had sworn to protect, frozen in stone by a magic spell for 1,000 years. Now here in Manhattan, the spell is broken, and we live again.
look at this bag.
Defenders of the night. We are Gargoyles.
OG cartoon soundtracks were insane. Oh my god. Alright, well, that was Gargoyles. Love to see links to that. Will always have an amazing and unforgettable spot in my heart and mind. Like that show is just unforgettable. I definitely have to go back and check out some of the earlier seasons again, because it's been a while since I revisited that. But yeah, so that was the Gargoyles break it down, and that one there. We'll hop into one more video here. All right, so we're gonna be hopping into one last video here today. We're gonna be going to a deep dive here. There was this, well, we're gonna be diving into Darkwing Duck. So back in the day when this aired around, like with DuckTales and stuff like that, there was a lot of question whether this was the spin-off of DuckTales. You know, there was a character from the show, and their like secret double life and everything. But come to find out eventually that the creator, at least that it was his own self-contained story, everything. But Darkwing Duck was always is essentially, you know, like a version of DuckTales, but like a full-on superhero noir like styled version of like Donald. And so we're gonna take a look at the breakdown here to explain the full gist of the actual story of Darkwing Duck, history of Darkwing Duck. So, not a spin-off of DuckTales, The History of Darkwing Duck by Secret Galaxy. Hello. Let's check that again.
There's never been a more dashing, more daring hero as far as he's concerned, pulling double duty as a single father by day and a caped crime fighter by night, a television series inspired by the pulpy heroes of generations gone by, anchoring a block of animated series that defined afternoons for an entire generation. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is the history of Darkwing Duck. Episode animated series that originally aired in the US from September of 1991 to December of 1992, part of the Disney Afternoon, along with other Disney animated series like DuckTales, Gummy Bears, Duck Bears, Tailspin, and Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers before they were big-time movie stars. Darkwing Duck is the crime-fighting alter ego of Drake Mallard, sworn to protect the...
Okay, so that's what I was never sure on, if they came before any of their movies actually came out, or if the shows came first. So it seems like the shows were initial. I mean, obviously, aside from like Mickey Mouse and maybe Goofy.
City of St. Canard. With an arsenal of wonderful toys at his disposal, he is the fine line between a world of peace and happiness and total chaos unleashed by villains too dastardly for law enforcement. Expert pilot Launchpad McQuack joins him on his adventures, acting as a ground against the extraordinary heights Darkwing's ego may take him to, helping Darkwing get out of jams that his quick-thinking, heroic reflexes get him into. It is for his daughter Goslin that Darkwing Duck is driven to build a better tomorrow, to not only make St. Canard a better place to live, but to provide for her as a loving father. Villains beware, for he is the terror that flaps in the night. In 1990, Walt Disney Studios was experiencing a renaissance of animation in theaters and on television. Not that Disney hasn't always been associated with top-tier animation, but there are peaks and valleys to any creative institution that has been around since the 1920s. In 1985, after numerous delays and a loss of $22 million at the box office, The Black Cauldron had Disney on the verge of closing the animation wing altogether. But successes like 1988's Oliver and Company and 1989's The Little Mermaid put Disney back into place as the leader in American feature film animation. And a lot of that credit goes to Jeffrey Katzenberg. When Michael Eisner became the CEO of Disney in 1984, he brought in Katzenberg specifically to handle Disney's motion picture division, while on the television side, Eisner established the Walt Disney Television Animation Department with Gary Kreisel as president. One of the first meetings of Disney television animation was at Eisner's house, at which he suggested they develop a show based on Gummy Bears candy because his kids liked Gummy Bears candy. Disney produced The Adventures of the Gummy Bears on a gamble that they could dominate and profit from the television animation market as well by producing big-budget, high-quality animation for TV. Through the 70s and 80s, television animation in general had become a quick, cheaply produced medium intended mostly for selling toys. Gummy Bears' success prompted Disney to follow it with DuckTales in 1987, The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh in 1988, and Chip 'n Dale's Rescue Rangers in 1989. Meanwhile, they were also developing a total reboot of the Rocky and Bullwinkle show, one of the most popular cartoons of all time. It dates back to 1959. 30 years later, in 1989, Disney acquired the rights and started working their magic. The Secret Adventures of Bullwinkle was developed by Tad Stones and Michael Peraza Jr. It would have been an updated version of the show full of familiar characters like Mr. Peabody and Sherman, Dudley Do-Right, and the classic fractured fairy tales. But...
Wow, so Mr. Peabody and Sherman came back, was back then with Rocky and Bullwinkle. Oh, that's crazy.
Somebody
crazy. I forgot that it was original, because I think that's the same with, like, what was it? Not Lupin. Tintin, I think his name.
Realized that Disney didn't actually own the rights to the whole series. They had only acquired the home video distribution rights through their home entertainment division, Buena Vista Home Video. We couldn't determine who Disney fired for such a grave oversight, but rest assured, somebody absolutely got fired. Back to DuckTales, which was in its swan song after 100 episodes over 4 seasons. Having lost time and money to Bullwinkle, development on the new series was put into high gear. Jeffrey Katzenberg asked Tad Stones to go back to the drawing board and work up a James Bond-type show that Katzenberg wanted to call 00 Duck. That name was perfect for 2 reasons. One, it was inspired by an episode of DuckTales in which Launchpad McQuack poses as Bruno Van Beek working for the Duckburg Intelligence Agency, the DIA, trying to locate Dr. No Good, the leader of FOWL, the Foreign Organization for World Larceny. And 2, Katzenberg thought the name sounded cool. name for a show that would take over the James Bond-inspired super spy market on television and be a spin-off of the successful DuckTales. It was a win-win-win. James Bond had been in movie theaters pretty much every other year since 1962, with the latest one having been 1989's License to Kill, the second and final of 2 chapters starring Timothy Dalton. Coincidentally, that was the last Bond film for the next 5 years, giving the franchise its longest break since it began. While the Bond franchise was losing steam in 1989, Tim Burton's Michael Keaton's Batman goosed the superhero genre. A world with a case of Batmania was demanding more superheroes, something else DuckTales had previously explored. Gizmo Duck was an actual superhero, and more so, in the episode The Masked Mallard, Scrooge McDuck tried his own hand at vigilante justice. His costume and methods clearly inspired by Batman. 00 Duck, Gizmo Duck, and The Masked Mallard hinted at the potential for a Disney Bond Batman-type superhero series. Tad Stone took the concept notes he was given, centering Launchpad McQuack as the Bond character with Gizmo Duck as his partner. He pulled from his own personal knowledge and affinity for the Bond genre by adding the expected elements: gadgets, dangerous ladies, scene-chewing villains with goals of world domination, everything Katzenberg was asking for. So he was surprised when the concept was kicked back to him and he was told to try again. Wow. Frustrated by the failures of both Bullwinkle and 00 Duck, Stones decided to do what he knew he should have done in the first place: create the kind of show he wanted to create. Not a direct parody of James Bond, but a real, original, pulp-inspired hero that was also a talking duck man. Stones pulled inspiration from Doc Savage, The Shadow, Batman, The Phantom, Zorro. He was joined by Bob Klein and Mike Peraza, 2 artists who began developing the visuals to go with Stone's ideas. This version of 00 Duck was going to be a mysterious hero who wanted to look good while doing good. But the magic piece that would set the entire concept apart was when the team asked themselves how different Bruce Wayne's life might have been, which direction his adventures as Batman would have gone if he had also been trying to raise a daughter. Goslin was the missing piece of the 00 Duck puzzle. Everything seemed like it was in place. Katzenberg liked it. Buena Vista Home Video, the worldwide distributor of the series, liked it and began promoting it. Everything was ready to go until they realized they didn't have the rights to the name 00 Duck. 00 isn't a public domain title. It's not like Captain or Sergeant or Producer. It wasn't coined by the British Secret Intelligence Service. It was created by Ian Fleming. It's part of the Bond franchise. You can use it, but it's gonna cost you. And while Bond wasn't heading back to theaters, he wasn't going away completely. Kevin McClory, writer and producer on 1965's Thunderball and 1983's Never Say Never Again, announced in 1988 that he was developing an animated series called James Bond vs. Spectre. That one never happened, but it did eventually lead to the 1991 series produced by Murakami Wolf Swenson and MGM Television called James Bond Jr. It is on the list. The James Bond franchise was owned by the Ian Fleming estate, and they weren't super crazy about the idea of a talking duck man financed by the most powerful American animation studio making fun of the spy whom they loved. We couldn't determine who Disney fired for such a grave oversight, but rest assured, somebody absolutely got fired.
Another person fired, dude.
What was that? Darkwing Duck is on the attack. Criminals turn, run in fear. Today's the day. He's finally here. No more waiting. Time's up. Ready? Cause here comes Darkwing Duck. Get your friends and gather around. Cause Darkwing Duck's flying into town. Go Darkwing, go Darkwing, go. Go Darkwing, go.
Day.
As Tad Stones tells the story, quote, "I was never thrilled with the name because I was worried potential viewers would make the same mistake I had and assume it to be a tired spy parody instead of the pulp-infused superheroic action comedy we were planning. Problem was, I couldn't come up with a name. Unwilling and unable to give up, they threw it out to the employees of Disney Animation. $500 grand prize if you can come up with a name, and I swear to God, you better own the rights to whatever you submit. Gutsy Gander? No. Phantom Fowl? No. Fantastic Fowl? No. Fearless Fowl? No. Danger Duck? No. Deadeye Duck? No. Daring Duck? No. Daffy Duck? You're fired.
Yeah.
Get out.
Yeah.
Get out.
The winning name Darkwing was submitted by Alan Burnett. Burnett collected his $500 and left Disney to work on the Emmy Award-winning Batman the Animated Series. Stones added Duck to the end of the name in reference to the hero being a talking duck man.
Quack.
Darkwing Duck had his name, his family, but he didn't have his own look yet. He was still essentially Donald Duck in a white suit with a cape, a domino mask, and a fedora. Toby Shelton reworked the character from top to bottom. New colors for his suit. Launchpad is now the sidekick. The rest of the details, his world, his his mission filled in as they began to write episodes. Darkwing gets his own catchphrases like, "I am the terror that flaps in the night," and "Let's get dangerous." Darkwing Duck's real name, Drake Mallard, is a nod to the real name of the Shadow, Kent Allard. Also, 2 ducks for 1 pun. Where are you going to get better rates than that? Darkwing Duck used a few characters from DuckTales, Launchpad, of course, Gizmo Duck, and you wouldn't be blamed for thinking it was a direct spin-off from DuckTales, intentionally capitalizing on the popularity of the previous series and fleshing out the Duckburg cinematic universe. But it isn't actually set in the same world as DuckTales, as Tad Stones explained in an interview with Hollywood Reporter in 2016, quote, "It drives fans crazy, but I was not a huge fan of continuity. I grew up with the Silver Age continuity with the comics. The basics everybody knew, but there was really no arc or change. Every time you picked up a comic, you knew where you were starting." Unlike its contemporaries, shows like X-Men the Animated Series, or really anything related to superhero drama, Darkwing Duck had the freedom to do whatever any episode called for on an episode-by-episode basis, meaning the writers were free to go in any direction, even disregarding things like previously established character origins, including Darkwing's if necessary. There are a lot of similarities between DuckTales and Darkwing Duck, but just enough subtle differences to let you know that you have stepped at least one half step into another timeline, into the multiverse of quackness, where Launchpad on DuckTales was known for his consistency at crashing vehicles. On Darkwing Duck, he is an expert pilot. Darkwing Duck first aired on Friday, September 6, 1991 as a syndicated daily series alongside...
So it's kind of like a multiversal thing before, you know, they actually started doing it with fucking Disney. Oh my god, Disney. Still. Always been trying to set up their multiverses. It never stops with the... They've been addicted since the beginning. That's insane.
DuckTales, Rescue Rangers, and Tailspin. It replaced founding member Gummy Bears in a block of Disney animation called The Disney Afternoon. The weekly series began the very next day, Saturday, September 7th, and continued to air Saturday mornings on ABC. By the end of 1992, the entire original run of the series had concluded with 91 episodes. Okay. That's 6 episodes of Darkwing Duck every week, technically 3 seasons in 2 years, and then right into rerun syndication through 1995, and then periodically here and there on Disney Channel's affiliates and services. Darkwing Duck was supported by toys from Playmates, who were still cranking out Ninja Turtles. They produced a full line of action figures featuring all of the key characters, Darkwing, Launchpad, Goslin, and villains like Steelbeak, Bushroot, Negavolt, and Tusker Nini. There were vehicles like Darkwing's motorcycle, the Ratcatcher, and the Thunderquack jet, and even role-play toys like Darkwing's gas gun, so you too could be the terror that gasses in the night. Milton Bradley released the Darkwing Duck board game. Tiger Electronics released an LCD handheld game. Kellogg's ran a mail-away promotion for PVC figures. There were coloring books, puzzles, watches, plush dolls, bed sheets, and even a Darkwing Duck fanny pack. You could fight for justice throughout St. Canard on your home video game systems beginning in 1992 with Capcom's Darkwing Duck on the Nintendo Entertainment System. If you like Mega Man, you will love this game because it looks and plays like a reskinned Mega Man 5. Also in 1992, a similar but completely original game, Darkwing Duck, was released by TTI on the TurboGrafx 16, the lesser of the 2 releases. This version was negatively reviewed for poor design and unimpressive gameplay, just like the TurboGrafx 16 itself.
Yeah, I was about to say, I was like, what?
If you've never seen Darkwing Duck, or if you just want to reacquaint yourself with the series, episodes have been released on VHS and DVD. But one episode is always missing in the US, because if the US is guilty of just one thing, it is overreacting to concerns about the depictions of magic and ghosts and the occult. One episode was removed from the syndication package due to content that might be considered questionable by some members of the viewing audience. The Halloween-themed episode Hot Spells features a school of magic, witches, blob monsters, imps, the gates of fire, and Beelzebub taking possession of Darkwing Duck's eternal soul. You can't buy it on any physical media that Disney has released in the US or stream it on Disney+, but you can purchase it on Amazon in Germany or find it here easily on YouTube. Darkwing Duck's adventures were carried over to the comic books as a 4-issue miniseries from Disney Comics beginning in November of 1991. It was supposed to be followed by an ongoing series, but Disney was trying to grow their brand a little too fast with a few too many titles. Their intent to be a third publisher rivaling Marvel and DC resulted in their complete collapse as the lack of sales did not reflect a real demand from readers. Disney Comics, founded in 1990, was out of business by 1993. But Darkwing Duck's comic adventures continued in the pages of Marvel Comics' The Disney Afternoon through July of 1995, as well as Disney Adventures magazine through 1996.
Yeah, because I do remember having some Disney comics. Like, I know they did Kingdom Hearts comics with Disney. And then like they have Roof Troop, of course. What was it? I think they had some like Jungle Book.
In 2010, ahead of the 20th anniversary of Darkwing Duck, Boom
of
Studios announced a new 4-issue miniseries called The Duck Knight Returns. It was written by Aaron Sparrow and Ian Brill with art by James Silvani. The fan response was overwhelmingly positive, so Boom extended it to an ongoing series, where the original animated series intentionally avoided building any kind of shared universe between Disney Afternoon properties. The comics dove right in. 18 issues ran through March of 2011 before the series was canceled because Disney bought Marvel in 2009 and subsequently pulled back all of their comic book rights. The Muppets, Pixar, and everything related to the Disney Afternoon that Boom had been publishing since 2009 was canceled. In 2016, Joe Books announced that Darkwing Duck was again returning to comics. Aaron Sparrow and James Silvani were both returning to the title. Ian Brill, one of the original writers of the Boom comics, was conspicuously absent. After infighting over who was responsible for what during the original successful Boom run, Ian was left to defend his contributions by himself. Everyone else, including Sparrow, Silvani, and Darkwing Duck creator Tad Stones, refuted his efforts to be recognized as the driving force behind Darkwing's resurgence in the 2010 Boom series. Issue 1 of the new Joe Books run was released in April of 2016. Issue 8 was released in March of 2017, after which the title was canceled due to low sales. But you can't keep a good duck down. In 2017, DuckTales the cartoon was rebooted for its 30th anniversary, bringing back classic characters like Scrooge McDuck, Huey, Dewey, Louie, Launchpad McQuack, and Gizmo Duck. The series
That's the one with David Tennant at the helm, and I love anything David Tennant does. That is my doctor right there.
It sets up a potential backdoor pilot for a new Darkwing Duck series. The episode Beware the Buddy System gives us a look at Darkwing Duck as a real in-world television show where Darkwing is portrayed by the actor Jim Starling, voiced by Jim Cummings, the original voice of Darkwing Duck. And later in the episode The Duck Knight Returns, Scrooge McDuck is producing a Darkwing Duck feature film, and the role of Darkwing is recast with Drake Mallard. Jim Starling, at this point a washed-up has-been actor, is upset and even attempts to kill Drake Mallard, causing an explosion in which it is presumed that Starling died. The tragedy prompts the cancellation of the film, but Launchpad McQuack convinces Drake Mallard to fully embrace the role as a real-world superhero as Darkwing Duck. Walt Disney's streaming service Disney Plus is an insatiable beast, always hungry for more content. It's the perfect place to explore concepts like Darkwing Duck even farther. A reboot is currently being built with Seth Rogen and Ellen Gold producing through Point Grey Pictures. Tad Stones, the original creator of Darkwing Duck, is on board as a consultant. Okay. Dynamite Comics is preparing to release a new comic based on the series in 2023, as well as re-releasing the original 1991 series. Darkwing Duck is not just a fondly remembered series, it was recognized by the animation industry for its achievements. In 1992, Jim Cummings, the voice of Darkwing Duck, won an Annie Award for voice acting. Darkwing Duck's most recent high-profile appearance was in the 2022 film Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, a movie where, ironically, a fictional in-world movie called Double O Dale is repeatedly referenced. Jim Cummings reprises his role as Darkwing, booing the Rescue Rangers during a mid-credits sequence, urging the crowd to chant along with him. We want Darkwing! We want Darkwing!
So wait, so did they finally just give him the bag for the 00 reference?
And he's not wrong. Darkwing Duck maintains a dedicated fan base that was happy to see him return in DuckTales and is ready to see him carry on the fight against villainy. A return today during this golden age of superhero-centric entertainment would echo Darkwing's rise to prominence during the superhero explosion of the early 90s. Daring duck of mystery, champion of right, swoops out of the shadows. Darkwing owns the night. Somewhere, some villain schemes, but his number's up. Better watch out, you bad boys. Here comes Darkwing Duck. Thanks for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber.
But yes, no, that was the history of Darkwing Duck, Secret Galaxy. Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm trying to think if I watched. I think Darkwing Duck was a little before my time, but I definitely caught a little bit of it here and there as far as like on reruns on Disney. And then I definitely have to. I think I've seen that newer version where like the two Darkwing versions are fighting, because I remember seeing that episode was really cool. So I'm gonna have to go back and try to view the OG, see how that all holds up. I think, and see if they actually released the reboot of Darkwing. Let me see, because that was in talks in 2020. Well, I would assume that, because that was what we found out about the Rugrats was. Okay, so it still looks like it's in development, possibly with Disney Plus. So Still nothing fully concrete looks like just yet, aside from obviously it being in the DuckTales reboot. But yeah, no, awesome to see the actual introspection of like what brought about Darkwing Duck, and like it being essentially one of Disney's first steps into their multiverse of madness addiction and wanting to create like multiple universes. Well, and in this case, I mean, it wasn't necessarily Disney that was doing it, but because they did want a more of a direct spin-off of DuckTales. And then it just so happened that the better version so happened to be the alternate universe type, almost type thing. And it seems like from there they kind of like, well, what if we do this with everything? All right, we'll end that there. Secret Galaxy, we are final review for today. Thanks everybody who stopped in and taking a look. We'll be continuing our nostalgic deep dives of this, but yeah, definitely dope stuff. I will catch y'all later.